Audio cast test, Transportation Committee.
All right, we're going to start the meeting. If everybody could take their seats, please. Before we get into the meat of the agenda, we have a number of special guests in the room today. I think most people know this is Take Your Grade 9 to Work Day, and we have quite a complement in the room today. So I'd just like to say hello and welcome to Georgia Cunningham, Maggie Nahas, Sarah Dolan, Victoria Blay, Riley Screeton, Lauren Flaboria, and Anne Sangagati. So welcome, and if you have any questions, I'm sure your mom or your dad can help you with that, and if not, I'm sure the people at the media table will be more than happy to help you with any questions you have about what they're doing here today and what their role is in a committee meeting. I'm sorry, I've missed someone, and Councillor Wilkinson's granddaughter. Oh, perfect. I didn't miss anybody. Great. So we're going to go through the agenda to start. Carrying on with the meat of the meeting. We have, first of all, no regrets today, no declarations of interest. Confirmation of the minutes of October the 2nd, 2013. Confirmation of the joint minutes of October the 9th, 2013. Carried. Thank you. Their communications as noted in the agenda. We, number one on the agenda is the 2014 Draft Operating and Capital Budget Transportation Committee. I was thinking we'd hold that, yes. We have a presentation. We also have a number of motions and a number of public delegations as well. Moving forward, we have a status update, Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending the 25th of October 2013 received. Thank you. We have number 3 on the agenda, Parking Operations, Maintenance and Development Branch Business Plan. I should point out that in receiving this document, it's a revised document 1, which reflects some changes to page 9 of the document. Is this received? Thank you. Sorry, carried. We then move on to the councillor's item. First is infilling of ditches by resident. Is there any need to hold this, Councillor Moffat?
No, actually, between last meeting and this meeting, I actually had a chance to sit down and chat with Wayne Newell, and I'm good with how this is going forward at this time.
Okay, so received. Hold it then. And number 5 is the increased use of scooters and bikes. I believe this was an inquiry put in by Councillor Clark and Councillor Hubley.
No, this is Shimashenko and Hubley.
This is Councillor Hubley.
This is Councillor Hubley. They need to hold this, Councillor? Hold for a question as well? Okay. Number 6 is speed reduction on Vista Park. That the Transportation Committee recommend to Council that the speed limit along the entire section of Vista Park Drive between Lake Ridge Drive and Esprit Drive be reduced to 40 kilometers per hour. Carried. Thank you. So we'll move back to the main agenda then, and I'd like to call staff up to do their presentation on the 2014 Draft Operating and Capital Budget. Ms. Shepherd, are you ready to start?
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of Transportation Committee. This first slide is basically an agenda for this item on the agenda, and what I'm going to do is just make an overview presentation, and then the rest of the agenda will be turned back over to you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of, I'm going to go through that. So in terms of what is before you from a budget perspective, there's two key areas for a review. There's several branches in Public Works as listed on the slide. You've got the Office of the General Manager, Business Services and Traffic Management and Operational Support, Roads and Traffic Maintenance, Parking Operations, and Fleet Services. And then within Planning and Growth Management Department, you have the Transportation Planning Operating Budget. So those are the operating budgets that you will be looking at today. So just to give you a sense within those, in terms of the significant changes, and you'll see the first one up there in terms of the General Manager's office. There's a significant reduction shown on this slide, and essentially that relates to the reduction of one FTE in the General Manager's office. You'll also see that Fleet Services has a significant increase shown on the slide here, and that's primarily due to the requirement to replace the stores racking and shelving to comply with new regulations. And then finally, within Planning and Growth Management, you see a % change increase here, and that is as a result of one additional FTE related to cycling planning and functional design to keep up with the program that we have moving forward. So this slide is familiar to you in terms of a balance between the increases and the offsets. In terms of the maintain increases, essentially there's the employee cost of living, less 0.3 million related to staff rationalization, and there's over 6 FTEs associated with that. And then there's the remainder of that in terms of the increase is related to increase in fuel of $1.9 million. So on the growth side, the $1.4 million that you see there is primarily related to 50 additional lane kilometers of new roads, 35 kilometers of gravel road that has been converted to hard surface, and 35 kilometers of sidewalks and pathways. And on the offsets, you see the offset from Service Ottawa, and again, that's the savings associated with several initiatives related to Service Ottawa, in particular including 6 FTEs. So this slide gives you a summary of the FTE changes for 2014 for the branches that you will be considering. And just to highlight, where the main one is in terms of additions, what you're seeing is transportation planning with one additional FTE, and that is to deliver on the cycling program, as I mentioned previously. And then in terms of reductions, you see 6 FTEs associated with Service Ottawa, and then an additional 6 associated with rationalization across the Public Works Department. And again, just to highlight the changes related to maintain, as in other areas, adjustments for potential contract settlements and benefit changes. I've already mentioned some in terms of inflation on energy, for fuel, for instance, fleet costs and goods and services contracts, et cetera. And then I've mentioned the additional resources for cycling and safety program, and then Service Ottawa and other savings. Flipping now to the growth area, I already mentioned that the growth is driven by an increase in the roadway inventory, roadway, sidewalk, and pathway inventory primarily, and in fleet service, new costs associated with fleet growth in the client departments. Moving to the 2014 capital budget that's in front of you today, the total that you will be looking at today is $227 million, and you can see the breakdown there in terms of renewal, growth, and strategic initiatives, and again by area. So by fleet, and then the integrated roads, water and wastewater, transit services, transportation services. And just note that the integrated roads, water and wastewater as listed here does include the rate portion of those projects. So this slide just shows you where it is that the capital funding source is, and I'll just highlight the primary two areas where the revenue comes from to support your capital program, that being the reserves, 34%, and then secondly, the development charges at 28%. And again, just to remind you in terms of your council priorities, and clearly the budget that's in front of you aligns with several of your council priorities, providing infrastructure to support mobility choices, providing and promoting alternative mobility choices, making sustainable choices, and then aligning strategic priorities to council's tax and user fees targets, and maintaining and enhancing the city's financial position. While not in front of you today in terms of approval, I did want to just take a look, step back, because highlight some of the work that is going to continue in 2014 as a result of the 2012 Ottawa on the Move budget approval. So with over $500 million in funding approved in the 2012 budget, Ottawa on the Move will see 400 plus projects completed in 3 years. Since 2012, over 255 renewal and cycling initiatives have been started and are to be completed this year, with the bulk of the remainder of the projects to be in 2014, and there's a few, like Main Street, that are scheduled for completion in 2015. So the slide shows Ottawa on the Move consists of over 400 projects, and you can see the breakdown here on the slide. Now, in terms of what is in front of you today for approval, the next two slides break down several projects that are highlights in the renewal area, road resurfacing, sidewalk renewal, structural renewal value. I'm not going to go through these. I think that they've been mentioned in many other venues. And then on the growth side, again, there's several projects listed here just to highlight some of the projects that are in front of you today: Campo Drive Extension, Brian Coburn Boulevard, Ped Bridge over the Rideau River between Donald and Somerset, and you can certainly go through the list. And finally, in the capital highlights, this is within the public works area. There's within fleet, you can see the capital approval that will be in front of you for Green Fleet. On the renewal side, there's several initiatives that you will be considering. On the growth side, you've got traffic control signals, safety improvement, and some work at the Antares Yard. And then within strategic initiatives, the audible signal program and the pedestrian countdown signals. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sheppers. We have a number of delegations, so I thought we, with the committee's concurrence, we'd hear from the delegations before we directed questions to staff. So the first delegation is a surprise. It's Dale Harley on behalf of the National Capital Heavy Construction Association, and I believe Dale has a PowerPoint for us. Welcome, Mr. Harley.
Just want to stress that the association is taking a different approach to its budget presentations this year. So you've noticed that we've been absent from some of them, but we will be obviously here for transportation since it is a critical one. So just response to that little quib to get started.
No problem.
Anyways, good morning. My name is Dale Harley, and I am addicted to infrastructure renewal. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and make this presentation to you this morning. I'd like to actually start off with some congratulations. The Ottawa on the Move program, this $340 million program, as we have said in the past, has been a terrific initiative in terms of renewing city assets. The city has recognized the importance of infrastructure renewal. Your comprehensive asset management program recognizes that deferring maintenance of infrastructure assets has cost more, has a cost that can present itself in the form of increased future renewal costs and reduced services. The long-range financial plan 4 recognized the need to increase renewal funding to a level of $165 million from about $80 million. And this year, your own capital plan recognizes that 60% of the transportation budget is dedicated towards renewal. There are significant investments in transportation this year, and we thank you for that. 63% of the total $359 million budget is allocated to transportation, and in particular, the $45 million program for resurfacing is well over double what we've seen in the past. I think that's a positive step forward. I guess we should also recognize that, well, not part of the budget per se, but the Stage 2 of the light rail transit plan with its 35 kilometers of track and 19 new stations is very much needed, and it's a very bold program to invest $2.5 billion by 2023. There's a reason why we say that it's important that Ottawa focus on transportation infrastructure, and that comes from the 2012 Canadian Infrastructure Report Card that was prepared by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that identified that almost 53% of roads throughout Canada are ranked as either being fair or below. When we look at the condition of roads in Ottawa, things get interesting. Across Canada, as I said, 52.6% of roads are classified as being fair or below. In Ottawa, that figure climbs up to 77%. And when you just look at collector roads, you'll find that 80% of collector roads are fair or below. And actually what's really alarming is the percentage that is rated as being poor or very poor climbs to over 50%. So there's clearly a need for focus on road infrastructure. And quite frankly, your own comprehensive management asset management plan notes that deferring maintenance of infrastructure assets can cost has a cost that can present itself in the form of increased future renewal costs or reduced services. And as you can see, it costs 5 or 10 times as much to do a partial reconstruction, or if you let it deteriorate to the point where it's a full reconstruction, gets very expensive. So the dilemma we face as the National Capital Heavy Construction Association is, while we are applauding you for what you're doing, the question remains with us is, could you in fact be doing more? And now, I've already referenced the long-range financial plan 4 and noted that that is going to see a required increase up to $165 million. You're sort of stuck at $80 million flatline for quite a while, so I think there's an opportunity to start addressing that. When you look at your forecast for annual capital expenditures over the next 4 years, 2014 is the lowest year. Council has consistently been below their target tax increase of 2.5%. And if you were to adopt the actual 2.5%, you'd raise an additional $7 million, which would permit you to pave another 80 kilometers of road lanes, which is important. So we respectfully ask Council to consider a token increased investment in road infrastructure for the following reasons. The May 8th, 2013 motion was really introduced at the last minute, and there was limited debate and no public consultation about this. Obviously, road infrastructure, as I've seen, is in need of much repair here in Ottawa. Condition of roads infrastructure, as politicians, you know, is a high priority for your residents, and increasing the road infrastructure renewal today will result in saving you money tomorrow. So thank you very much for your opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Harley. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much. And I'd now like to call upon Mr. Steve Harris. Morning, Mr. Harris. You have 5 minutes to present.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Basically, I come forward as a private citizen, so I'm not representing anyone. So from my perspective, I give some feedback on the budget itself. And the budget, I view, must be fair for the future as well as the present. And I see that the budget must take an approach to road funding, in particular that allocates funds to, right now it allocates funds to expanding automobile commuting by widening roads, and that is a proven health issue in cities. And recent studies published, which I have noted in my presentation, show that commuting actually is linked to cardiovascular death. So I propose the following motions based on that principle. One, that current and future road expansion budgets be reduced and allocated to more sustainable transportation. Two, that the city adopt at least one best practice each year to reduce automobile commuting. And three, that the city restrict the size and speed of larger vehicles as well as limit their routes to dramatically increase the health and safety of cyclists and pedestrians. And recent evidence of cyclist deaths caused by large, heavy machinery is in evidence. Next, I believe that the budget must start to reflect the true costs that are involved in the infrastructure. The budget must recognize that land, space, and air aren't free. Land used for roads and parking is not free. The true costs need to allocate health costs as well as this. So, for example, in studies, they found that people who were commuting more than 30 miles a day were way more likely to have high blood pressure, stress, and heart disease. So, in fact, the policies of this city are promoting poor health through their road policy. Further, the further a building is from the city center, the more extensive and longer a road and transit networks need to be. Therefore, it costs more to reach it for every single service that you provide to that building. The property footage of that building, in terms of how much it takes to actually move across that property in front of it, also affects roads and service costs. And these costs are not factored into the taxation mechanisms whatsoever. So therefore, it encourages large properties that are sparsely populated. So large buildings with small numbers of people, large buildings with large lots that are in the middle of nowhere and hard to reach. And those are developed, and the development charge is charged, but then the ongoing costs are not counted into. So I propose the following motion: that the Transportation Budget Committee work with the appropriate city committees and provincial authorities to change the budget process to reflect these true costs. Next, I think that when you formulate these budgets, we have to look at desired outcomes and not just pure targets. Setting achievable targets is good only if those targets achieve the desired outcome. For example, a poor target is a 10% reduction in dead cyclists, when really the desired outcome is no dead cyclists. So getting a 10% increase it doesn't really achieve anything, even though you meet that target. I propose a motion A that in the budget, specific outcomes and how that budget and specific time frames actually achieve those desired outcomes rather than just targets. Because if the city desires a healthy and green environment with short commutes, the budget and the planning process must focus on the results and not just targets. And finally, the transportation budget is clearly linked to the planning. It is more expensive from a transportation perspective, service sprawl for roads, transit, cycling, sewer, garbage, everything. So I propose a motion that the Transportation Committee budget and the Planning budget have specifically linked items that clearly target those outcomes that I talked about that result in more efficient transportation networks that actually cost less. So, for example, development charges and tax rates in those developments must reflect not only the initial costs, but the foreseeable transportation upgrade costs that populating those areas are going to eventually lead to. For example, widening roads, putting in transit, putting in light rail, all those things, all those costs are not factored into the initial development. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Are there any questions for the delegation? Thank you. Now, I believe the next delegation is John Woodhouse from Walk, Ottawa.
Quite okay. Quite used to it. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay, can everyone hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Woodhouse, for coming out this morning. I think you know the rules.
Yes, I do.
You certainly presented before, so off you go, and we'll hear what you have to say. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. We at Walk, Ottawa are very concerned about the amount that you are now currently budgeting for pedestrian use. The initial funding of $3.5 million per year has been decreased to $750,000 per year, and this will be happening, as far as we can see, for a foreseeable future. And this is, to Walk, Ottawa, is quite unacceptable. This reduction is causing quite a strain on the sidewalk infrastructure that is badly in need of upgrading and repair. Walk, Ottawa feels that, well, we have sent you a note on the 25th of September outline our objections to the amount that has been budgeted for the sidewalk infrastructure. Is not enough for us to maintain what we have, irregardless of going forward, which according to your draft plans for 2031 to 2031, you're never going to make those objectives. And if I may now step away from my role from Walk, Ottawa, to a more personal note, I was going to an event at the MS Society on Woodward Avenue. I got off the bus on Carling and Clyde. I then had to proceed down what was deemed a roadway, minus a sidewalk. It was quite the experience. It was in the evening. There were cars coming every which way. I was on the roadway because there's no sidewalk. And basically it was quite a hazard. And I'd like to thank the committee for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, Councillor Deans?
You can roll me out of order. It's a question arising from the delegation, but I understand at one of the budget consultations, the city manager addressed this issue and said that there would be improvements. And I'm just wondering how, I wasn't at that meeting, so I'm just wondering how those improvements are to be incorporated into this budget.
I believe Ms. Shepherd would probably be in the best position to answer that question.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'd be happy to answer that. There was this issue raised in terms of accessibility on construction sites at one of the budget meetings, and the city manager at that point committed to go back and look at how we can improve accessibility on construction sites. Mr. Newell is here, and I know he's been seized with that, but the city manager made a commitment to really take a look at it based on some of the evidence that was before us at the budget meeting and likewise at Transit Commission with Chair Deans.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions in or out of order related to this delegation? Councillor Fleury.
Yes, question to Ms. Shepherd about this. I think some of the delegation's points are related to historical issues that we're having in the network, cycling or pedestrian specific. And we know that there's some websites out there that are actually tracking incidents or even reporting where people are having issues. Are we considering that in year after year budget and also in the TMP discussions that we're having next week? Are those all captured and tracked internally as well?
Mr. Chair, you're raising a very good point. So there's two issues there. There's one with respect to the missing links and the consultation that we've done with respect to the TMP. So we think we've done a really good job of getting feedback from the community and looking at sites that have identified those things. So that's one thing. I hope that we'll be debating that shortly at this committee. So that's one item in terms of infrastructure investment. The other issue that is an ongoing concern is the issues around accessibility and getting in and around construction sites. And in particular, what was raised at Transit Commission, for instance, is the inability when you're in a mobility device to actually get on a bus because the ramp has nothing there's no curb there for the ramp to get low down on. So I think there's some things that we need to really look at, and that would become part of the capital budgets. So when you approve your capital budgets, you have my commitment that we would be looking at how do we ramp up accessibility during construction to respond to those. And so if you have some sites where there's very specific information, that will help us to be able to direct our contractors and raise the bar on our expectations.
I guess my comment was mainly around, are we being reactive or proactive in our response? And I'm looking for, these, especially the cycling ones are becoming, and even pedestrians, they're coming really specific in terms of location or the type of issues. Is our staff on an ongoing basis, especially operationally, looking into those issues and trying to see what we can do immediately in terms of responding to the concerns of residents?
When we're aware of things, we take them very seriously and respond, so yes.
Are there any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much, Mr. Woodhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Now we will move to questions to staff on the budget presentation itself. So I'll start compiling a list. I thought we would take general questions first, and then we would move to line by line, similar to what we did at FEDCO yesterday. So any general questions about the budget presentation, then we'll move to the line by line.
Yeah, mine are specific.
Specific or general, Councillor Chernishenko? General, okay. So we'll start with Councillor Chernyshenko then.
It's by rank, I guess. Start with the generals. Okay. I'm just noticing in our overview the comment, invest $4 million to improve peak operation in highly congested intersections. My question is a general principle. What we've seen in the past is as we widen roads and widen intersections, it may help car movement, but the undesirable, unintended consequence is longer crossings for pedestrians, perhaps more complicated intersections that are challenging both for driver and cyclist. Is it a normal practice that, or explain to me please, how we can improve peak operation in highly congested intersections, but in a way that is not going to make that pedestrian crossing, for example, more difficult? Because to me, I immediately think widen, reduce congestion, widen, and we know particularly with seniors, anyone with speed issues, crossing an intersection is a challenge.
So in terms of intersection modifications, there's several drivers for them, and clearly that is the best bang for the buck in terms of getting the operation and the ability of people to move freely. So there is trade-offs, though, that happen at intersections, and we are very aware of those trade-offs in terms of cyclists and pedestrians and vehicles and transit that need to use those intersections as well, and we do try our best to accommodate that. Now, there is also programs to tackle safety-specific issues that you can ask staff specific questions later, and then you'll also note in the Transportation Master Plan that we have identified, a friction evaluation. So key intersections, we now would have a tool that would help us because, where there's big movements of pedestrians, I think we have to make different decisions than in other areas where there's perhaps much less in terms of pedestrians utilizing intersections.
Of course, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, or if you will, or a catch-22, where certain intersections we don't count a lot of pedestrians because they know better than to try to cross there. They've given up on it. Are there wider pedestrian islands, for example, so it's a two-stage crossing where we can be ensuring that if adding an extra lane or a turning lane is part of the reduction of congestion, that we will offset that with an improvement, a safer waiting area, pedestrian crossing time, the actual signal length, for example. Yeah. Yeah.
Even roundabouts kill pedestrians.
I'll answer that question through the chair. We do any intersection that's being improved. There's a lot of consultation goes on between the planning, growth management, traffic, the signals. We try to look at opportunities to make it safe for everyone, but it is part of every consideration when we go into a redesign of an intersection. We can get you more detail, or I can ask Phil Landry can explain more, but it is part of every decision would include all facets of users in that intersection. So, and we may have to look at opportunities like you're suggesting for crossings.
I'm glad to hear that as a general commitment. I'd like to reinforce that we never reduce congestion for vehicles at the expense of other users, that we find ways to compensate that. At a later date, I'd certainly welcome some kind of presentation to the committee about different means available to us and best practices. I think that would be helpful. And I guess the other one would just be a follow-up from the last presentation. I was just wondering if we have anything more specific about particularly online tracking tools and reporting of difficult places, challenges encountered. I gather at 311 there was some back and forth with a couple of residents, and 311 where we've now added another category for cycling, for example, hot spots where people can report through 311 when they've encountered a problem, a challenge, an obstacle. So that's one change, improvement that's come. But I'm thinking particularly online tracking tools that Could we, at minimal cost, given this is a budget conversation here today, be using more online tracking tools where a resident can, using the type of mapping that's available today, go right here with the arrow and say, you know, badly cracked sidewalk, impassable, right here, report that, and we get a very precise feedback from our residents?
Currently, we do, through the chair, we currently use the 311 system for notifications. If a person, and we set up, and Public Works has a program to do small sections of sidewalks or panels that are trip hazards, where we need accessibility help. We do have a list of those that come in through 311. We also do inspections on our own to identify and then prioritize all the locations that, and then during the summer we run a concrete crew that goes out there. We'll replace sections of concrete, paving stones, or do repairs on issues like that. But normal process right now is if they go through 311, the 311 will document the location, and that gets tied to a notification that goes directly to our yards in that geographical area, and then that goes on our list, and we send somebody out to investigate. So that's the practice at this point in time. We could enhance that with the technology available. We can take a look at that, but there is a program in place to deal with those type of issues at this point in time.
Okay, so it's currently 311 as the preferred option, but I would like to encourage you to explore something online, very precise. People often are quite visual and can help. I have found that residents are our best eyes and ears on many things. They are places every day that we or staff quite simply can't be, and something might have happened overnight. It can be very useful. So the more precise we can allow residents to be in their reporting, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other general questions? Because what I propose to do, we have a technical amendment. I'll have Councillor Hubie has a motion on that, and we'll deal with that, and then we'll go to the line by line, and as we go through, if you have any direct questions related to that or any motions related to that, we'll deal with that at the time. So I'll just ask Councillor Hubie to read in the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is, whereas the narrative for capital project 906893 O-OTM Rex-Kerr was incorrectly reflected on page 63 of the budget book. Therefore, be it resolved that the Transportation Committee approved the following revised narrative for this project. The sewers and water mains in Rex and Kerr require replacement due to poor condition and age. Sewer and water main service connections will be replaced to the property line. Full road reconstruction, roadway curbs and sidewalks will be included. The 2014 authority request provides for construction. Project estimate is comprised of roads, $473,000, sanitary sewers, $1.008 million, storm drainage, $978,000, and water mains at $1.502 million.
Thank you, Councillor Hubie. Carried? Thank you. So we'll move to the line by line, again, this is a motion of Councillor Hubie's. We'll go through it, and as I say, if you have any questions or motions related to each individual item, we'll deal with them as they come along in order. I've spoken to the clerk's office, and there is a space for you to bring your contemplated motion.
Where would that be?
That will be just before we carry the whole piece.
Okay.
And so
I've got, that's this motion, but I want another one I want to do about the crossing guards. I'm not sure where that would do it. There isn't a line in there. There's a comment in there about annualization. That's not on a special line. I'll bring it up when we get to that page, though.
There is. Page 15. Page 15. Adult crossing guard, $75,000.
Now, that's the annualization of last year. That's a... Yeah, that's why I'll do it.
Yeah, but perhaps while we're going through, you could check in with the clerk's department.
I've already talked to staff about it.
You know, where they feel it's appropriate to bring the motion in terms of the timeline. That's what I'm saying. So, the Transportation Committee recommend that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Transportation Committee 2014 draft operating and capital budget as follows. 1. The Transportation Committee operating budget, page 5, as follows. A. General Manager operating resource requirement, page 7. Approved? Carried?
Can I ask a question here? In terms of technicality, can we ask our questions on specific items before we start approving? Because that's very challenging. If ever there'd be motions coming into them, we might...
Well, we're going to follow the process we used yesterday at FEDCO, which is we're going through each individual piece, and as we come to that, if you have a question or comment around that piece, we'll deal with that. We'll suspend the vote. We'll have the discussion, the debate, and when that's resolved, we'll move on to the vote. So we've done 1A, General Manager Operating Resource Requirement, page 7, of Business Services Managers Operating Resource Requirement, page 10. 1B, Traffic Management and Operational Support as follows. Sub 1, User Fees, page 16. Sub 2, Operating Resource Requirement, page 13. Carried?
Carried, I didn't hear right.
Does that include page 16? That's where I have a motion, Mr. Chair. Page 15, is that included? Is that page 15 the one you just...
I think that's included.
Okay. So we're going to hold that item, and we'll work with you on the motion, and we'll come back to it.
Okay, thank you.
So item 1D, Roads and Traffic Maintenance as follows. Sub 1, User Fees, page 22. Sub 2, Operating Resource Requirements, page 17. Carried?
No, I have a question on page 17.
Okay, well, let's deal with that now.
Yes, question to staff about, both are tied, page 15, Maintain Services, and page 17, Road Operations. So I'm curious to know, in the roads operation budget, we put $102 million, and every year we seem to have the discussion about funding related to Inner Boulevard, weeds growing. I want to know if in this year's $102 million process for road allocation for road operations, if that includes weed removal in the Inner Boulevard.
Through the Chair, no, that's not included in this year's budget. The money that went in this year went into our winter operations and to maintain existing services. That maintain includes the compensation for cost of living, all the contracts and inflation that we had to absorb. So that's where the money went into this year. We were not able to add any new initiatives through this program.
So what I understand the issue related to new initiatives, but is there an expectation that there is a certain removal or certain targets for removal of those weeds? Because in some cases they're a major issue related to sidewalk access or even road access.
Through the Chair, the way we dealt with this is we do an enhanced street sweeping program, which is intended to reduce the growth along the curb line. We don't have the funding at this point in time to take on all the boulevards and all the sections of roadway where the weeds are growing up through the cracks in the boulevards. That was removed some time ago, and we'd have to reinstate it through a program to continue to do that or start doing that again.
So is the issue staff time, or is the issue equipment, or is it a combination of both?
Okay. Through the Chair, our summer programs for roads are the street sweeping, which is a mechanical operation, waste management, which is crews are going around removing all the waste from the right-of-way. The rest of it is generally asphalt and concrete repairs. We don't have staff that are assigned to look after the weeds in boulevards because that's not a function that we've been doing. So it is a lack of resources both in terms of either contract dollars or internal FTEs and compensation dollars.
This is more of a comment. I know where we're at in terms of new initiative and growth, but on page 15 where it says maintain services, we're reducing by 1/3 FTE. To me, a realignment, at least providing 1/3 FTE, starting that type of initiative would be a start somewhere, because we know that it's not just in the inner urban area, but suburban councillors have some issues related to some of the weed removal. So I'll leave it as a comment, but we expect to see improvements there in the next couple of months or even year. Thank you.
Councillor Harder.
Thank you. It was when you go back to when the province banned the use of pesticide, that's where now, 5 years after the fact, is where we've seen the results of that stupidity. And so when we stopped doing that, how much money were we spending, for example, for the truck that went along to the crack you're talking about with the wand that was right along the crack? So you're not seeing like the 5-foot-high thistles and all the other noxious weeds that we're not even supposed to allow to grow. How much money were we spending at that time on that?
Through the chair, I don't have that figure, but it would have been citywide. The locations would be equipment across the entire city, all the boulevards. I'd have to come back with a cost from that time frame.
And I didn't expect you to have it probably off the top of your head, but I mean, it's something that's been a bugaboo for me for a long time. And if you were to do what Councillor Fleury is talking about and have actually staff picking these things, the cost between what that cost was and the cost of actually hiring people to pick weeds is astronomical, correct?
That equipment, yes. If you were looking at some type of application where you could do it through a motorized piece of equipment, it would be a lot cheaper than the process we would have to use now would be staff time, generally whippers, weed eaters, and manual removal in a lot of cases.
Well, I can tell you the kind of conversation I've had with the majority of the people, wherever I am in the city, for them, when they talk about our city not looking good, that's exactly the kind of stuff they're talking about. But unfortunately, it is a situation where I'm sure that the provincial government would absolutely not move where they should on this to a reasonable situation where licensed people, which are why golf courses can use product to maintain their spaces, licensed people would be able to, we would be able to hire, or we could be training some of our staff that could provide that function. We could buy that service, or a person who owns property in the city could buy a service from a licensed contractor who would come and do that, knowing all the conditions, etc. It's unfortunate that because we are not willing to try that, we have no chance of success. We need to try. We need to put it out there. I have talked to some elected people, and they would welcome the City of Ottawa in that regard. So I think it's, if I go back to when the city started to look like that, and again, it's because of the number of years now that we've been without, right? So that we're seeing the people, and the earlier this year with the parsnip, right? The same thing happening in Barrhaven, where people are paying premiums to be on the pathways along the Jock River and that sort of thing, and their children are polluted with wounds, festering wounds, because we are not able to control what we used to control. So I think that's a discussion that we need to have. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people would not want to do that in an election year, but I frankly think that we're late doing it anyways, and I would welcome having the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this matter? So for sub 1D then, sub 1 user fees, page 22, and operating resource requirement, page 17, carried. Sub 1E, parking operations as follows. Sub 1 user fees, pages 27 through 37. Sub 2, parking operations, operating resource requirements. Councillor Clark.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I note on page 23 that the revenue is almost exactly the same as the gross expenditure. Is that by design? In other words, does the parking revenue only cover the cost of having the parking operations people? Or is that a transfer in to cover the cost?
Through the chair, generally our revenues exceed our expenditures when we put money into the reserve. That's normal way the parking process works.
So you fund a reserve, then you pull from the reserve to meet the costs?
I apologize if I may not have been clear. We cover our operating costs, and there's money left over to go into reserve. There's money generated from the parking operations that covers not only our operations, but also allows money to be placed into reserve for future use.
But the parking operation referred to here is the maintenance of the parking lots and things like that. This is not the White Hornets.
No, this is just the parking operations for public works. Yeah.
So I just wondered how it could work out so even. That seemed to me quite different.
Okay. Any further questions on this matter?
I just want to follow up.
Okay, Councillor Moffat.
It's just a follow-up to what Councillor Fleury was talking about earlier in terms of staff resources for dealing with these issues. Is it possible that you can come back to Mr. O'Keefe, I'm speaking to you, that you can come back to this committee with a full breakdown of what your summer student contingent does over the course of the summer? So how many summer students you bring in each summer and what they're doing?
Through the chair, yes, we have that breakdown already because we did reduce our summer student complement for 2014. Yes. So we had that breakdown as part of our budget review. We can provide that.
Sure, if you can just distribute to members of the committee, that'd be appreciated.
I think Councillor Moffat.
Yes, we will.
Councillor Fleury, please.
Yes, I'm sorry, Chair, I might have missed this one here, but on page 20, there's a growth item, and I don't want to get into the debate of roads or whatever, but we're building 85 kilometers of new roads, and when I do the breakdown of costs, it equates to about $15,000 per kilometer. I'm just wondering if there's a benchmark there, or if we're targeting a piece, or if it's just those are the actual cost of building roads historically. I'm wondering where $15,000 is coming from, and if that is the case, what are we ranging it from?
Through the chair, if the maintenance costs are broken out by winter and summer operations, and it's based on our tenure, on our average that we have over a number of years. We track that. We keep that numbers for OMBI, and we report back. So it is based on an actual running average of costs over the last number of years.
Councillor Daines.
Just wanted to ask some questions about the reduction in revenue on parking operations due to, it says in the notes, Ottawa and the move construction. But I guess a two-part question. One, is there any way to make up that parking revenue? Because presumably those cars are parking somewhere else. And second part, we've probably all noticed the construction that's been ongoing for a long time on Lisgar Street, and the reduction in parking on that street is a direct result of a private development. So the second part of the question are private developments somehow, are we recouping the lost revenue that we lose while they basically take parking off our streets in order to do their construction projects?
Through the chair, to my knowledge, we do not recover anything from developers for the last... Oh, okay. We have a guest speaker.
Mr. Chair, in terms of encroachment fees and that when there is new buildings being built, yes, we do charge a fee, and it is in the millions of dollars. So we do bring in a lot of revenue in terms of from the developers in terms of the encroachments when they have construction shacks in the road and things like that. Yes.
So is there some sort of an analysis that shows that we're recovering all of our lost revenue?
Mr. Chair, yes, it's based on that. So much revenue that we would have received, and certainly I think we even charge by a square foot basis in terms of that. So there is an elaborate formula in how we establish that. And when there's a lot of construction, we make a lot of money. When there's hardly any construction using our streets, we don't make any sort of thing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moser. And then the first part of the question about any other way to make up the lost parking revenue.
Well, we do have the way we can increase revenue would be come to our some of the off-street parking lots that are available in the area, so they might drive up some of the revenue. If Lisgar Street's not available, City Hall would increase in parking rate or parking usage. We can add temporary parking meters, but if there's space available, but we do have to remove them from service that are within the construction zone.
Okay, and just one final question. I don't see the encroachment revenue here. So where does the encroachment revenue that Mr. Moser referred to show up in the budget?
Mr. Chair, it's within the planning department's budget, and it would be considered by at planning committee.
So, Mr. Chair, that might be an issue for you to take up, because I would think if we're losing the revenue in transportation, it's showing up in the planning budget, you might have an issue to take up with them there. Thanks.
Fair enough. Any further questions, Councillor Deans? No. Councillor Boylston.
I just want to follow up, and we talked a little bit about maintenance, road maintenance, sidewalk maintenance in the growth areas, and I want to follow up with Mr. O'Keefe, and I believe he's already answered this, so he may be repeating himself. In some cases, we have temporary pathways, sidewalks, connections, and they're in transition where the developer has a responsibility for them. Are we assuring that somebody will be maintaining those pathways, whether it's the city or the developer? And talk about winter maintenance now.
Yes, we will take that through Chair. We'll be looking at those as a location, particularly if it's a pedestrian link, a critical pedestrian link, we'll make sure they get maintained or have someone to maintain them.
Great. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Councillor Boyles. Any other questions on this matter? Councillor Clark.
Perhaps Mr. Moser might comment that the value added from the building more than offset any temporary loss in parking revenue. Can you confirm that?
Mr. Moser?
Again, I try to remember the numbers, Mr. Chair, but yes, in terms of the revenue that we received from that, it would offset the amount of revenue that we would have lost from parking.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? So carried on 1 sub E sub 1 and 2? Carried. Thank you. 1 sub F, Fleet Services Branches Falls, sub 1, User Fees, page 42. Sub 2, Operating Resource Requirement, page 38. Any questions on this item? Councillor Fleury.
My question is on page 4041, and it's about fuel costs. So we assume that fuel costs keep going up every year, but I was looking at local websites, and today's average in Ontario is $1.21. And when I look at last year's trend, just same day, same a year ago, we were at $1.19. So we expect fuel to keep going up, and it just, we factor it in, but I'm wondering how that fits into the budget. Is it an estimation or is it an actual?
I'll try not to give you a long explanation, but fuel prices do continue to go up. We have times when they actually sort of flatline, but if you look historically, I think we can all remember paying 70, 80 cents, per liter, and we're not paying that today. What we do, though, is we enter into hedges for our fuel, for our diesel fuel only, though. So the majority of the fuel, I believe, in Mr. O'Keefe's shop is diesel fuel, but a portion of it is not, is regular gasoline, which we can't hedge. We enter into hedges. We've got already 70% of 2014 is hedged, and we're already starting to hedge for 2015. So the price goes up, but it's going up at a much lower rate because of the fact we're able to enter into these hedges to offset, to keep the budget lower. So we're not subject to the vagaries of the market, the ups and downs that we see, which are significant in the fuel area as a result of that. But it does go up slightly every year.
So what I'm hearing is we can't buy on a low date and secure funds for the year.
No, we can't buy on a low date. We don't buy, we hedge. We try to hedge on a low date. And then that gives us, locks in our price for the future year, which is why if you would look at other municipalities who do not have hedges, they're probably trying to budget at probably around the $1.20 level. We're going at $1.03. And that's the result of going into hedges.
Well, that helps. Also, I'm wondering, so there's the actual cost per fuel per liter, but I'm wondering from the other perspective, aren't we buying more efficient cars, more efficient fleet, lower fuel consumption? Shouldn't that at some point see at least a flatlining of that budget?
Two aspects to your fuel. One is volume, one is price. We hedge for the price. The volume, yes, you are using more fuel-efficient vehicles. There's an initiative in fleet for buying green fleet to reduce the carbon footprint, but you also have more trucks and more vehicles every year as well. So it's the same as you see with consumers. Even though you have more efficient electrical appliances in your house, you actually have more appliances. So you're still using the same amount of electricity.
Any other questions? Councillor Hubert.
Thank you. My question's to do with page 38, and it's the budget numbers. I'm wondering if staff could clarify why in 2012 we're looking at $218,000 on the manager's office. We forecasted for 2013 $209,000, but it came in at $227,000, and now we're estimating $234,000 for 2014. Just curious as to why so much fluctuation there in that office.
Well, just through the chair, we have gone through some adjustments in that office through our fleet services. These numbers should reflect what the current status is. It could have been funding that got moved in there because in the account there was some travel that we had to adjust funding from different groups into other operations. So I'm assuming it was just an adjustment to meet the needs for this year. But I can double check with Don.
I thought the intent, we were consolidating fleet services and we expected to get some savings out of this, but I'm looking at these numbers here of 2012, 2013, 2014, and I'm not seeing savings. I'm seeing increases. I'm wondering if something didn't happen with that plan, or when are we going to see the savings?
Okay, that just under the fleet services, we did have someone in that office leave during the year, so we had to double cover. So there was some funding that didn't get used to pay out for compensation for that position. We had to cover off with an acting position, so there was some savings through that. So the new number reflects what the actual cost should be for a full year.
But in the overall budget, like the net requirement, that's also showing the same kind of increases here. Are we going to see some savings here, or is that what can be expected even after the consolidation of fleet services?
And through the chair, we have actually turned in about $4 million in fleet over the last 4 years. It was part of the Service Ottawa program that fleet transformation was a component of that. All that money has been turned in and taken out of our operating budget, so we have achieved the goal of the savings that we had projected. We continue to look at it, but that money has already been taken out of our operating budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on this item? So F sub 1, sub 2 carried. Thank you. G, Transportation Planning Operating Resource Requirements, page 46. Any questions or motions on this matter? We got Councillor Clark. We're at G, Transportation Planning, Operating Resource Requirement, page 46. Councillor Fleury.
It's a comment, page 48. Project manager with expertise in cycling planning, it's much needed. I'm happy to see it in this year's budget because there's so many initiatives that need attention, and we don't want to see backlog there.
Thank you. Any other questions or motions? Carried then. We'll now go back to the item we held, 1 sub C, and we'll ask Councillor Wilkinson to introduce her motion before we carry the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll read the motion first and explain it. That the staff be directed to identify a funding source that could provide for $24,000 additional school crossing guards, if warranted, in advance for Council's budget debate on November 27th for Council's consideration at that time. What this is, this would allow for up to 4 new crossing guards, which is fewer than we've had in the past because we don't have a big waiting list right now, but there are new schools coming on stream that may require them. And but talk to staff about it, and they would like to have a little time to determine where the funding could come from. It's a small amount, but it still has to be identified. So they'll come back to us before the budget, identifying where it could come. And this would mean that they would not be put in place, of course, unless they did the study and that it was actually warranted to have a crossing guard. And that would allow for only 4, and I think that's enough for this year to keep the cost down.
So we're just making sure the right motion is on the screen. We're just going to, we have to change what's on the screen for a second here to reflect the motion introduced verbally.
I have some questions.
While we're doing that, Councillor Deans has a question, so perhaps we'll go that way.
Just wondering if we could have a staff comment, and also how many crossing guards do we currently have, and why was there no funding for new areas where there might be emerging needs in this year's budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's currently 157 crossing guards in place. This year we did studies in April and May and identified 7 that were wanted, and they were funded starting in September. At this point, we have a list of about 20 locations for next year that we'll study in the spring, and based if they meet warrants or not, then we would move forward with
well, how are you going to move forward if you don't have any money?
We would. The plan would be to request the money in next year's budget for the following year.
So why didn't you request any money for 2014?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Why didn't you request any funds in the 2014 budget? Or did you?
At this point, there's not the need because there's no backlog. In previous years, we've had backlogs of between 5 and 10 locations. Through the funding we've had over the last few years, we've been able to get to the point where there's no backlog now. So at this point, all locations that are warranted have crossing guards.
They do their studies in the spring.
I believe we have the correct motion on the screen now with the dollar figure of $24,000 in it. Are there any further questions or comments?
There is a comment. I'm happy to see this motion brought forward. I think the issue is, again, the warrant piece. It's not that there's no need. We're hitting areas where there is a need, but when we get into actual numbers, they're not meeting the peak.
The problem is that they do their evaluations every spring. So these are the ones that people have put them in to be evaluated, but because they've come in since the last evaluation, they haven't been evaluated yet. If they evaluate them in the spring and they're warranted, the best time to start is next September, not a year from next September. And this will give us the worst locations, at least, will get started. And I'm sure they'll have 4 from the number they've already got on list.
Any other questions or comments on the motion? Carried? Carried, thank you. We'll now move on to So we'll now go back to C in its entirety. So 1C, traffic management and operational support as follows. User fees, page 16. 2, operating resources requirement, page 13. Carried? Carried. Thank you. Moving forward, Councillor Clark, the Transportation Committee Capital Program, pages 51 to 54 as follows. Sub A, Fleet Services Capital Budget, page 55. Individual projects listed, pages 56 through 58. Any questions or motions on that? Carried. Carried, thank you. 2B, Integrated Roads, Water and Wastewater Capital Budget, page 59. Individuals projects listed pages 60 to 78, including amended projects 906893 O-OTM Rex-Cur on page 63, 64, tax supported funding. Carried? No question. Councillor Blois had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a good news story, but I would just want to confirm something or a couple of things with staff on this, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the right page here, page 66. And I think Mr. Gontier saw him earlier in the audience. So I'll start the question. One of the streets that's showing up at long last is Claroux Crescent. It's showing up as road resurfacing. This is an old street left over from regional days, so it has an old standard, I think sort of semi-rural, semi-urban, if there is such a thing. And I just want to confirm that there's more than resurfacing. I think because it is under integrated roads, water and wastewater, and basically there's just a swale that captures. Is it just paving, or is there anything more in here that...
Chair, the scope of work, like most of the resurfacing projects, also includes curb repair and replacement. So in the case of Claroux, it will include the curbs at the same time, and also that has an impact on the boulevards, so we're going to be cleaning up the boulevards also at the same time.
Right. And the sidewalk, for instance, that's in front of the seniors' home, that's causing them grief right now with para-services, paramedics, et cetera. Will there be a look at that to see how that can be remedied, or...?
Yes, as part of the scope of work, Chair, we will be looking at basically what other infrastructure pieces need to be addressed at the same time. And what we could do is maybe offline is once we get into the design detail, is follow up with you just to make sure that you're aware of the details.
Thank you. I'll follow up with you on that once you get into that stage. Mr. Chair, I have another question actually about Searville Road, but I don't want to jump. I don't know if. Well, I don't want to take the ward councillor's thunder away here if he's got his hand up or hand in it or something like this.
Yeah, no hands up, so it's all to you.
Okay, so just getting onto Searville Road falls below the line of the stretches in question fall below the. This would be on page 69. And I'm not trying to move it above the line, but this is a vital link in terms of cycling from not just from that ward, but the wards further east. And there's some operational issues that could probably address the immediate concerns before we get this stretch of road above the line. So I don't know who can answer that in terms of the work that can be done, whether it's out of the operations budget, in order to try and smoothen out the shoulders. We actually have, it's the missing piece. We have cycling lanes that end at one bridge. We have a mess in between. We start having some good lanes again. So it's the missing piece that needs some work. Is there somebody that can address that? I didn't think that was yours, but welcome back.
Well, Chair, we have identified Searville in terms of resurfacing. It is shown as below the cutoff, and what we typically do is basically look at how prices are coming in during the course of the year and coordination issues, and that often allows the opportunity to be able to get a few more roads done than originally anticipated. So that's why we identify those roads in the
But in the event that money doesn't come through, because you're really dependent on how the contracts flow in or how the tenders come in, are your colleagues on the operational side able to go in there and do something? Because right now, the cycling lane, we've talked about this before, the cycling lane ends at the one bridge, and all of a sudden you're into crumbling concrete, which forces a cyclist out into the lane, which isn't the worst place to be unless there's an impatient car behind him. And then everything beyond that is basically in a sad state of repair. there's interim work that could be done to at least make cycling a little safer, not just cycling, but even for pedestrians. And I know you're not in a position to answer that, so I don't know
If I might, Councillor, the Searville Road is identified in Phase 1 of the Transportation Master Plan, so I would expect that, in future budgets you're going to want to address that. And of course, the work would be coordinated with the resurfacing work, so it would be done in concert, but it is specifically identified as a missing link for cycling.
I know.
That doesn't address an interim measure that you're speaking to, but it does speak to a bigger picture.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to make. I know we have to wait until either the repaving comes above the line or the TMP kicks in, but in the meantime, there's a need. It's actually a safety need that's been identified over and over and over again. This year, we didn't even paint the lines leading up to it, which is probably just as well. Why paint the lines leading to a decrepit stretch? And no disrespect, I mean, it affects all of us. And I think operationally something can be done, and so it's not in your budget, but somewhere there needs to be coordination with the other side of the house.
Mr. Chair, we'll take that specific one offline in terms of a spot improvement, because there are some urgent issues that we do target. So we'll take a look at that and see how it ranks in terms of that specific location.
Okay, and we'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Mr. Gantier. Just a quick question for yourself. On page 68, there's a bunch of projects that are in Ward 21, which is obviously great. Back in 2012, there was an additional project in there, and we discussed this in the past. It's Long Island Road. We had 2 projects planned for Long Island Road over 3 years. It would be a resurfacing and then a water main installation. Obviously, that's not doesn't make sense financially, doesn't make sense for residents, so we've coupled those projects together, which means it's not happening in 2014. The question I have is, we had money through Ottawa on the Move earmarked for that project. Does that money still move with it, or is that, well, how does that work? I just want to make sure I don't lose that somehow.
Chair, when we're going through the coordination issues, often there are situations where projects will get deferred, or in some cases even advanced because of coordination opportunities. At that point, typically what we will do is reallocate those fundings to other projects to allow other projects to proceed. But when the time comes for Long Island to proceed, then we would be rebudgeting at that point, so that we're not further delaying the implementation of the project.
Okay. And just to let you know, and I've told you this time and time again, if you can just push for that 2015, that'd be great.
Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the funding allocated in 907-432 for property purchase for park and ride lots, and I'm just wondering if the problem at Greenboro is the demand exceeds the capacity at that lot, and I'm just wondering if there's funds identified here. There's no details in this analysis of where those funds will be spent. Are there plans to address the excess demand at the Greenboro Park and Ride?
Sorry, just to clarify, is that page 75? Yes. Okay, I'll have Ms. Chi come up to the table.
Sorry, Councillor, I was trying to find the page. So what was the question again?
My question is that we have a problem at the Park and Ride at Greenboro in that the demand exceeds the capacity, and I'm just wondering if there are no details in this line item. Are there plans to address the demand issues for the Greenboro Park and Ride?
For the 2014 budget, this is to deal with the innovation park and ride lot in Canada. It's not, the Greenboro facility is not part of this budget request.
Well, that's not what the note says here. It does mention the Innovation Drive issue in Canada, but it also says park and ride lots and possible park and ride property purchases in the urban communities outside the Greenbelt.
Yes, and we also have some existing authority in the Park and Ride account, and there are a number of projects that we have there. So as they come up, we will look at the properties for expansion. It's a whole program with funding annually, and we will look into this.
Yeah, if you could just look at the Greenboro issue and how you're going to address that demand, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, please.
On these below-the-line projects, do we, if for some enormous reason one of the ones above the line can't get done, some new complication or other, do we move these projects up automatically, or do they have to come back to us?
They move up automatically.
Okay. That's great comfort to me.
That's why we're here, Councillor. Councillor Fleury, please.
Oui, une question pour M. Gontier à la page 62, l'item c'est 90-6885. Ce sont les rues Tudor, Coupal, Marc qui sont assignées pour un resurfaçage. Vous savez, dans le passé, on a eu des discussions pour la rue North River dans ce coin-là qui est présentement appartenu par la CCN. Pourriez-vous nous expliquer un peu publiquement la situation à cet endroit-là? Parce que la route est dans la même condition, sinon pire que ces routes qui sont adjacentes.
Oui, M. le Président. On essaie de faire d'autres suivis avec la CCN pour voir leurs intentions au niveau du renouvellement de cette route-là. Il y a des infrastructures aussi au niveau de besoins d'infrastructures. Aussitôt qu'on peut coordonner ces besoins-là, on va être en mesure d'aller de l'avant avec les travaux sur North River Road.
Est-ce que vous croyez que cette année, vu que ces rues-là sont planifiées pour cette année, est-ce que vous croyez qu'il pourrait y avoir une décision au niveau de la CCN dès cette année, puis qu'on pourrait incorporer ces 4 rues dans le resurfaçage?
Monsieur le Président, je crois qu'au niveau du budget et la conception qui a besoin d'être faite, c'est pas réaliste pour 2014, mais qu'est-ce qu'on essaie d'avoir, c'est plus ou moins un échéancier qu'on va être en mesure de communiquer sur à quel moment est-ce qu'on sera en mesure de procéder avec les travaux sur cette route-là.
Parfait, parce que ce que vous mentionnez, c'est que c'est pas seulement un resurfaçage, c'est ça? C'est pas juste un resurfaçage et des travaux en souterrain?
On a des travaux souterrains qui sont requis, donc on va essayer de coordonner ces travaux-là avec la CCN.
Parfait. L'autre question, c'était au niveau de la rue Slater. Je sais que c'est du côté de ma collègue Diane Holmes. L'item, c'est 90-7142. C'est Slater, c'est-à-dire entre Bronson et Elgin. Puis la raison pour laquelle je le soulève, c'est parce que je faisais partie d'une discussion au sujet de Ottawa on the Move. Puis je pensais que la région était pour être vraiment modifiée suite au train léger. Mais je me demande comment ces deux systèmes-là sont en rapport un à l'autre.
Monsieur le Président, si vous voulez juste confirmer la page, juste pour que je puisse m'assurer que j'ai la...
Je crois que c'est page 62. Habituellement, l'item, c'est 90-7142. C'est la rue Slater.
C'est avec les travaux qui sont anticipés sur la rue Slater, sur la réfection des lignes dédiées aux autobus. Donc, c'est vraiment juste au niveau d'entretien pour améliorer la qualité du service le long de la rue Slater.
Perfect. Another of my questions is on page 76. This one's about the transit corridor protection. I'm wondering how, with the TMP and some of the transit goals, the vision that we've brought with the 3 lines that we're going to see in the next couple of weeks, how this, I think it's important to protect corridors and to make sure that we buy them early on so that projects aren't delayed. Can you speak about that related to this item specifically?
Mr. Chair, as it describes here in that item, typically we would try to get property through development and other means, but we always have had an account, so strategically if something comes up that we need to acquire, and the reference here is railway rights-of-way, that we have an account that we can use to purchase and acquire those rights-of-way.
Do we have contingencies there, or is there it's a yearly capital review? Do we have reserves?
It's a yearly budget ask.
Okay. I'm surprised by that because of the amount of land we might have to purchase in the next 5 years to complete some of the objectives.
Mr. Chair, in terms of individual property acquisition, that would take place like with the Confederation line. That would be included in the project specific. So, as we go forward and if there's property required for one of those lines, that would be included and has been estimated, in fact, in the TMP with the estimates that are there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson.
This is just a question on page 73, the Tunney's Pastures bus staging area. Just was wondering why this isn't part of our budget for the LRT budget as opposed to a separate budget, because it is directly related to staging for that particular project.
Mr. Chair, it is related to the light rail, but it was always identified outside of it, and this budget is for the works that are required for that staging area.
So do we have any idea of how much money we are spending on things because of the light rail that are adding that we have to budget outside of it? Like this is one, do we have to do it at the other end? Are there other places where we're having money? Because it gives an idea of what the total project cost of doing the line. I don't object to it at all, but I think we should know what the total cost of doing it is.
Certainly we can, there's a number of different things, and increasingly as this shifts over into operations, OC Transpo will have costs. This is one of. I don't believe there's a lot of.
I was more interested in the capital cost as opposed to the operation at this point.
I think this is the only additional one, because even the facility at Blair is included in the LRT, and it was because of the uncertainty in terms of where we would be placing this. We were looking at different options and finally settled on this location because we had to deal with Public Works and Government Services Canada.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions? So there's a slight change in what we're voting on here. 2B should read Integrated Roads, Water and Wastewater Capital Budgets, page 59, and Transit Services, page 72. Projects listed at page 60 through 78, including Amendment Project 906-893, O-OTM, Rex-Kerr on pages 63-64. Tax-supported funding. Carried? Thank you. Just some additional pages. Before we move to the last item in the budget, which is 2C.
Mr. Chair, there's just one little question I had in that. It's really an error, I think, in it. On the Western Transitway, Bayshore to Moody, they say completion in 2018, and I spoke to staff that the funding is all in 2015. It should be finished by the end of 2016 or 2017 at the latest, and I really would like that to be more accurate so people know when it's coming.
I think we're getting an answer from staff on that.
Yeah. I did speak to staff, and they thought 2018 was very late.
We will. You're absolutely right in terms of the date, so we'll take that away and make sure we've got the right dates here. Okay.
So for 2C, Transportation Services Capital Budget, page 79, individual projects listed, pages 81 to 138, we have a motion of Councillor Wilkinson to consider before we consider 2C. So if you could introduce your motion, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually to reallocate some of the money around from timing, which is when it's actually going to happen. It's not a change in projects and things. And staff came to me and asked me if we would do this because it affects the project in my area. We're going to spread out a little more. And the advantage of doing that is because the developers are prepared to front-end some parts of it, so the project will go ahead, but we won't have to spend the capital right away. So it is on the page I'll read it out. Whereas the 2014 draft operating capital budget was tabled on October 23rd, and subject to the tabling, staff identified that Strandherd Drive is a necessary supporting infrastructure element for the capital investment track application at the 416 employment lands, and is required for the early construction of the first phase of the South Nepean Collector Project. Whereas the early construction of the first phase of the South Nepean Collector Project will be subject to a front-ending agreement with the regional group of companies to advance phase 1 of these projects from a previous start timeline of 2018 to 2014. Whereas staff advises that although Campo Drive has been identified with full funding authority in 2014 as a multi-year project, the spending plan recommended funding with authorization in 2014 to support ongoing design work with further commitments in 2015 and 2016. So the full funding authority for 2014 is no longer required to satisfy the timing and construction of these works. Therefore, it resolved the Transportation Committee capital budget be amended as following. This is on page, it says page 53. I don't think it's on page 53. It's 83, isn't it?
It can't be page 53.
No, it's not page.
It's got to be another somebody.
Somebody has it. I had it out here before, and I've lost it now. Whichever page is. The project is just 903-196 Campo Drive, and the funding would be then in 2014, $31,840,000, and 2015 was $4,220,000. The change would be to make it in 2014, $24,250,000, in 2015, $4,220,000, and 2016, $7,590,000. And then Strandherd Drive would be amended from having amounts $1 million in this next year and 7.5 in 2016 to have the total amount $8,620,000 in 2014. So that just really means that Strandherd can go ahead right now, and the money will be there for the various phases of the expansion of Campo to serve that whole area alongside the Queensway in the appropriate years. And I have the amended narrative that might help a little bit for Campo. It says, this project involves the construction of a new 4-lane roadway to extend Campo Drive from Didsbury to Huntmar to address growth in the immediate area and the Canada West community. Development of residential community along with an outlet centre in the business park is currently underway, and these funds will also be available to reimburse developers for the construction of portions of the road under council-approved front-ending agreements. Due to development pressure west of Campo Drive, abutting Palladium Drive, and in order for the city to protect the road corridor for future road widening, this project also includes the functional design to widen Palladium Drive west of Campo Drive to the limits of the future north-south arterial. So this is all implementing the Canada West Development Plan effectively.
Okay, thank you very much. To staff, is this a staff-supported motion or recommended motion?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments related to the motion? I know Councillor Blois had his hand up.
No, not with respect to that motion.
Oh, with respect to G. Okay. So if there are no questions or comments, carried?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, Councillor Blois, with respect to the last item.
Okay, so this is with respect to transportation services, section C, and I have a couple of questions and a couple of concerns. I'll start you with page 96. Well, I think they were just interchanged. I'm sure the page will be corrected. As Councillor Moffat has just pointed out, I think it's a typo error where two words were interchanged. I hope it's not the projects that were interchanged, because then you're going to see me cry. But so Anderson at Renault, I don't know who I guess it's Phil. Just want to confirm, I'm looking at the WIP, if these computers ever stay on their page. The WIP indicates that in 2013 we had the design money, and I know your staff has been working on that. It shows that the balance of the design money will be consumed this year, which means I'm assuming then the design is done, right? And we're still talking about a roundabout at this point?
Yeah, the functional design is near completion, and the money that we're asking for next year is for the detailed design and construction.
So it's for construction, that should cover it. And is it the same design that we showed the community association out there a couple of months ago? Is it, do you know if we're still on the same track?
With the roundabout?
Yes. Okay. So, and then, as Councillor Moffat pointed out, I think the wards were interchanged, and he'd probably like to get his ward moved up. And
Yeah, that was just a...
Eli's not here to defend himself, so... Okay, so... The other question in the area, also talking about Renault, there's other works happening as we speak. Now, they're developer-driven, so they wouldn't show up in here. You don't, for instance, the developers are on the hook for working on Renault further down. Is that something you deal with? They'll pay for it. They're doing all the works.
Yeah, if it's a development, it would be through development. It wouldn't be us.
Yeah, so it wouldn't show up in here. So the next one deals, and this may not be yours, deals with Brian Coburn from Navan to Mer Bleu. Is that? Can we get up whoever? Next victim. We're on page, in the 2014 budget, page 120. But I'll refer back to the 2013 budget first, Phil. In the 2013 budget on page 91, and you won't have that in front of you, this project shows up with a $2 million contribution, and it says this is for the 2-new-lane arterial roadway required to support growth. The 2013 funding is for detailed design, with funding for construction to follow in 2014. So now I'm on page 120 in the 2014 budget, and I'm looking for that logical follow-through. And what it says here is that funding in 2014 is required for detailed design, with funding requested in 2015 for construction. I would have thought the money we approved for the 2013 budget would have taken care of the design work. And I guess the question is, what's the status of that design work, and why are we're asking a lesser amount than what the construction is? I see the overall project seems to have increased, but we're asking for less money, and we're saying it's for design in 2014. Somehow, I would have thought we would follow through on last year's budget and do the construction request this year. And why would we be asking for more design money?
Through the chair, Councillor, this estimate represents a more accurate assessment of the work required, including design and construction, and it incorporates the design, or the development timing of the surrounding lands, and to ensure that construction of the roadway is in keeping with development trends and movement in that area. So the design was delayed, is being suggested for 2014 with construction in 2015.
But that in effect delays this project another year. And was the money that we put in last year, or in 2013 for design, was that not sufficient for this project?
It was not sufficient, as we had to increase it, so this was reflected in the 2014 budget.
Okay. We're also showing, and I'll try to find the right page, we're also showing design work for the Blackburn Hamlet bypass, which would connect with this. And that's also, I think, in the TMP. Both these projects are actually showing up in the TMP in the first stage. So on the one hand, obviously, it's not good news when road projects get delayed, especially in this case where we've been waiting for a CDP to be done in that area, and we've actually lost opportunities for employment lands to be developed because the infrastructure wasn't in place. So if this means a delay, are we able to at least coordinate it with the other segment? And then I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. We seem to have the two projects reversed. They're out of order. In other words, we're building from the east going west instead of from the west going east. And if we go ahead with just the Brian Coburn stretch from Navan to Mer Bleu, we're going to exacerbate the traffic problems that the locals are already suffering. So we also have the design money for the Blackburn Hamlet extension, which would connect to this. So what's the opportunity now to pull these two projects together and do them jointly, and to make sure that the project moves forward as one as opposed to two?
Through Chair, Councillor, we have over the last couple of years trying to coordinate a number of activities in that area, development, movement, trends of growth, as well as some of our other capital projects. As you recall, there are some realignment of some of those roads in those areas. So coordination between other capital projects is a key element to these works. Certainly, if there's additional opportunities to coordinate those to the city's advantage, we would explore that and be happy to report back what success we've had in trying to coordinate those projects.
So, but are you following I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's no use building the road from the east and having it basically dead end at Navan and then spill off into various directions, creating more traffic havoc. If it's done as one project, or we do the western leg first, it creates for just a better evolution in the area. And we've done the EAs for all of this. I mean, the EAs were done back in the 90s. They're probably outdated. There are other pieces of infrastructure, such as a park and ride, that needs to somehow fit in there. And I guess as bad as I think it is to push off this project, which should have happened years ago, pushing it off another year may actually be to our advantage if we can pull the two together. And right now, that's not shown in the TMP, and I don't see it. I don't see it being pulled together into one project here.
Through the Chair, Councillor, I would suggest and recommend we proceed with the design. As part of that discussion on the design, we can explore that different type of phasing and coordinate that with the Blackburn Hamlet in that case, and the purchasing of lands within those areas in order to realign certain intersections. So I would suggest to proceed with the design makes good sense. And through that design, we were able to better explore that coordination, that piece, and if in fact we need to delay the construction of the project or phase the construction of the project to better coordinate with a Blackburn Hamlet, for example, or a realignment of a intersection, then I think at that point we were better able to make that decision based on good, solid design information.
So, speaking of realignments of intersections, there's an intersection there that's been redesigned 3 times, which is adjacent to this. This doesn't show up anywhere in here. Are you talking about that? Are you talking about the Navan-Paget-Renault intersection?
That's correct.
Okay. But that design, this isn't capturing that at this point, and there's nothing in the budget on that intersection.
There's some future dollars for that intersection, but we would look at that as part of the design of this extension because they're all part of the same puzzle. We can't do one without the other, and the last thing that we want to do is redirect traffic into areas that aren't designed to accept that traffic. So that's the realignment of that intersection is certainly part of the discussion and the design.
Okay, and that's the answer I was looking for. So I'm going to direct the question over to Ms. Sheppers. In terms of the TMP doesn't seem to recognize the link between these projects, the way the phasing or the staging is laid out. I take it it's at the next Transportation Committee meeting when we're dealing with the TMP that would be the time and place to address this, to try and get this coordinated properly and to try and pull those pieces together.
So, Mr. Chair, to simply answer your question, yes, as part of the priority setting, you have raised a concern in terms of the relative priorities of projects. That's a discussion we can have. We have to work within the affordable envelopes, and so we are limited and constrained in terms of how much we can do when. So if that, your suggestion is to delay this one and advance the other one, that's certainly a discussion.
My suggestion is not to delay it. I'm disappointed we're delaying it, but if the delay gives us an opportunity to pull them together and do them jointly at the same time and to complete that area as opposed to leaving it all fragmented, then I'll welcome that opportunity. But I'm not looking for a delay. I mean, I'd rather advance the Blackburn Hamlet extension up to Navan and tie it in with this. Basically, to me, they're the same project. When the EA was done, and somebody can correct me, when the EA was done, it was done jointly for this area, and that was back in the mid-90s.
Mr. Chair, I don't have the details of the environmental assessment.
Well, I'll bring it up at the TMP meeting because I think that's where it needs to be addressed. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Flory.
I'll bring those items together. On page 80, the item is street lighting major replacement, and on page 101, the item is new street lighting. What I notice is that we're focusing our efforts on some of the replacements where there's not major, in my view, replacement needs, such as corridors like very pedestrian friendly, close to 3 schools. It's the extension of Chapel Street right up to Old St. Patrick, right behind OCH Community, and investment of a park. I'm wondering why, how those projects are prioritized and what's the intent of them.
Through the chair, the replacement program is to take care of the aging infrastructure in the street lighting system. So we've got a lot of cable faults, duct breakdowns, etc. So that's work that has to be done just to keep the street lights on.
So it's the functionality of being able to have a street light, but we have no program to upgrade street lights that are historic in nature, I'd say. Like the area I was defining, the pet area, the walkway in Lower Town, right at the extension of Chapel.
Through the chair, just for clarity, are there streetlights there now?
There are streetlights. They're often broken, and they're the old concept, just one bulb, yellow light, very outdated look, doesn't really give you anything for an experience.
Through the chair, we'll take that away and take a look at that specific location. That is the intent of that funding, to replace the aged infrastructure that's breaking down.
Okay. And the other one related to the new street lighting. It says in the description that the goal is to reduce overall operating cost of lighting. Well, I found out recently when we did as we were redoing the work for REDO renewal, that we still don't have a policy for LED lights. To my understanding, that would be an immediate cost saving. So I'm wondering where that's coming into, and how do we achieve these goals?
Through the chair, we are starting a pilot project on Carling Avenue with LED lighting. We're working with Hydro Ottawa. Hydro Ottawa does have some concerns about the specific power loading for LEDs, so the business case isn't quite where we do a whole-scale replacement of lights for LEDs. There's also some product issues, retrofit issues, but we are looking at LEDs specifically on the Carling corridor.
Maybe then you can explain how do we reduce the overall operating costs of these new lights if that's the goal of the program. Wouldn't we be more aggressive in installing LEDs?
Through the chair, the goal of the new program is to take care of the linkages where street lights aren't presently in place. So critical linkages, they're prioritized based on different criteria, and that's how we come up with the installations we're going forward with this year.
Thank you. On page 88, there's a parking life cycle renewal. And I'm intrigued to see some capital elements to parking, because I thought that the parking revenues are so restrictive, we can only use them for parking improvement, that we'd factor in the life cycle component of our existing structures. Could I get a comment on that?
Through the chair, yes, there is a life cycle component in all our parking operations. It's in the business plan that breaks down some of the life cycle work we're doing in 2014, but it is an annual program to upgrade particularly parking facilities. I know we're doing the Byward Market and the Clarence Street project this year.
Yeah, and I understand. I see the projects, some are in my area, but why don't we use the yearly revenue that we get from parking to create a contingency so that we don't have to have it as a capital ask?
Well, it is done annually. It is I believe it's just information. The money is funded out of the revenues from parking to do this work. Yes.
Okay, so that wasn't clear in the piece. Page 98, item 907272, Safety Improvement Program. The fourth point says intersection road safety. Very good, but right now we view that, I think around the table here, as an opportunity to say, hey, we all have intersections that fit. How come the list or the priority list wasn't added to that item? Is that because roads aren't, or the intersections aren't targeted, or is it because there's an opportunity there for?
These are locations we're still studying, so it's through our safety improvement program, and basically once we identify the measures that potentially could help reduce the collisions that are occurring there, we would then implement that.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is the following page, page 99, 907273, Traffic Incident Management. Really, I like this program, but as I found out this summer with some of the paid duty costs to a capital project, I'm wondering how much of this is just staff overtime?
No, this is for infrastructure. So if you go to the next page on page 100, it shows what, so in this case we're going to be installing variable message signs permanently on site. We'll also be doing some real-time speed volume and data collection. So it's all part of trying to manage our infrastructure more effectively through using advanced traffic management systems. And
okay, thank you. Page 106, PED countdown signals. I'm wondering how those are prioritized. Are they prioritized by volume of pedestrians, by warrants, by complaints? That's unclear to me because I'm surprised. We have an area where, just close to the university campus, there's a lot of PEDs, and none of these countdown signals are in, but they're also not on a priority list. And we've talked about it multiple times, so wondering how those are prioritized.
Through the chair, I don't have the warrant in front of me, but there would be a program that would guide us in the installation of the countdown signals. If you have specific locations, we can talk about them.
Okay, so I guess we have a meeting scheduled for those street lighting and the PED countdown signals.
That's correct.
Okay. Other element is on page 109, 907408. I've had the conversation with our staff in PED safety, or in the Transportation Master Plan, the PED plan, but I don't know why we're not including residential roads this is the linkages. It appears to me that we're putting a lot of attention on arterial roads, and that sometimes the connector to a residential road is as important. But because it's not included in here, it might actually fall off the map.
Sorry, just to clarify, in terms of the page you're on, is it 116 or
109?
109.
Page 109, 907408.
Because it specifically references collector and arterial, and you're asking whether it should also be available for
residential specific. Because there's some residential street that are actually a funnel for shopping malls or for transit needs, and because it's not included in that, we can't get that high on the list.
I'm just looking to Vivi and Jill for clarification, but it does speak to and linkages to existing sidewalks, which gives you a limited ability where it's a direct linkage to a collector or arterial. But in terms of missing links, these are the highest priority because of all the conflicts on arterials and collectors.
And I understand that, but can we maybe add some wording specific to residential to allow us to have that discussion at least?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, just to make sure that we are talking about the pedestrian facilities program on page 116 and not the development sidewalk project. The councillor is correct in that the primary focus of this program is on higher speed, higher class roadways vis-a-vis arterials and collectors. Local roads are considered, but local roads are not considered if that road already has a sidewalk on one side. And that speaks to the fact that local roads are lower speed, lower volume generally, and that they are designed to function as multimodal roadways, and if there's a sidewalk already on one side, we don't consider it for our program.
I mean, you know where I stand. I think there's still issues in established neighborhoods that are conflict where there's no existing sidewalks. So maybe until when this budget goes to council, before then we can maybe see if we can can find a solution to it. But I know what you're saying, so thank you. I have two little final points here. Page 124, the Rideau River Ped Bridge. Wonderful project. I wanted to recognize the help of the staff on about that. Concerns now are not for that bridge to proceed. It's proceeding, but it's actually creating the important linkages. I'm not worried about the cycling ones.
Can you wrap up? Councillor Tierney's been waiting patiently for his opportunity. Okay.
2 seconds, yeah. So cycling linkages mainly on both sides. So on the Sandy Hill side and on the Overbrook side, we've seen some objectives in the TMP, but as we're building it, I think it's important to create at least these initial linkages.
Councillor, we certainly understand and are looking at that as well to make sure that we get the most value out of that structure. That's one of the key linkages that's missing, and you're absolutely right, and we've had some discussions about how we might be able to improve those things.
Wonderful. And the final item is on page 136. The item is sidewalk and curb rehab. So I'm really happy to see that staff recognize Montreal Road as a problematic issue related to sidewalks. Just as a tie-in, that street needs a full streetscaping. So we'll have to find a way to really do, new lighting, new benches, new trees, because sidewalks are only a component as a part of an issue for that street. And I take it, as conversations I had with Mr. Gontier, that we'll engage in the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just actually wanted to look real quickly, and it's more of a comment. I want to thank staff, and I'm glad that specifically 907451, the network modifications, specifically Montreal Road and Shefford Road. I just wanted to really highlight, first of all, I'm very happy it's on there. It's been a failing intersection for quite a long time, but we also have the new Ridgecraft Sensplex that's going in, so I anticipate more traffic. I just want to make sure, maybe a quick comment from staff, is this in the back of your mind already, knowing it's going to open August 2014, that it will be relatively high on the list of work to be complete?
Well, certainly it's on our mind in terms of I don't want to make any commitments we can't keep, but when we get a more detailed schedule, we'll get back to you and let you know how it meshes with that.
Okay, well, my workings with staff, I guess there's a few major projects every year that could be afforded. This was one that fit within that slot. Mm-hmm. I know the process when it comes to issuing RFPs and the bureaucracy around that. There's reasons for that. But that seems to be our stumbling block most of the times, and I just don't want to be sitting around in June going, we haven't issued an RFP yet, and we're going to open the doors on these 3 brand new pads, increasing that much more traffic, and I'll be stuck in August going, great, there's all this traffic and congestion in the neighborhood, simply because we weren't able to achieve filing of paper during the proper process in time.
Mr. Chair, we will certainly take that as clear direction.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on item number C? So carried? Carried, thank you. We had 2 held items from the agenda, and the first is infilling of ditches by residents, and that was held by Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to the staff on that one is, the report is titled for the rural ones, but I want to make sure that we're also capturing the ditches that are in the suburban areas, such as my area, where we still do use the ditch systems.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The policy essentially applies to all ditches, both in the urban and in the rural areas.
I wonder if we should do some sort of a communications exercise on this to warn people about filling in the ditches, that they can not only flood their own properties but flood their neighbors. Because spring, we're all looking forward to the arrival of spring next year. It might be a good time to tell people ahead of time, don't fill your ditches in over the winter.
Mr. Chair, we should certainly take that as a follow-up. The policy actually has been in place since 2008, so it's not a new policy, but it's certainly something that we need to be reminding staff of the importance of not filling in ditches and the reason why that's important. And you certainly pointed to one of the concerns that's related to cause of flooding, which often is a consequence of that practice.
Great, thank you. That was my only question. Thank you.
Councillor Deans.
There's some real legacy issues with the former municipalities when it comes to filled-in ditches as well. Recently had a call from a resident on a street in the old Gloucester part of my ward that was complaining about flooding on the street. So I just took a drive out there to have a look, and it's a real dog's breakfast. There's drains that don't make sense anymore because they're higher than the area that it's draining down to. There's filled-in ditches. I mean, there's no wonder there's flooding problems. And I just wonder what kind of an assessment the city does of these streets when we get ongoing complaints about flooding on the streets. Do you go out and take a look at the whole street and see what's happened there? And do you address the street as a whole and how we're going to address the future drainage issues?
Chair, certainly how you've described is quite appropriate. There is a mix out there, and that's one of the issues that we had when we brought the policy forward back in 2008, and that was adopted by council, and it recognized that there had been variations in terms of practices, and what we were looking at was basically on a go-forward basis in terms of how we would be managing those issues. So things that took place, infills that took place prior to 2008, we weren't proactively going out and starting asking people to remove them, but certainly areas where issues were coming up, such as flooding, we would certainly be focusing on those areas and then work with the community in terms of trying to reinstate those ditches. What we're trying to control, though, beyond 2008 is basically to preclude that practice from continuing as it had in the past.
Okay, so if there are complaints about flooding on a street, then you go out and address it on a complaints basis. And would you look at the whole street or just the area of the complaint?
Mr. Chair, what we would typically look at is basically the area that's been influenced. So often the problem may be experienced at one location, but it's actually being caused by a series of events, so we would be looking at it more holistically to make sure that if we need to step in, that we're actually addressing the problem and not just looking at it in isolation.
So I could request that you go out and look at streets where I've received complaints and that you would address those issues.
Mr. Chair, we'll certainly follow up on them. The challenge that I would give with ditch infilling, if I can call it that, once we start approaching the homeowner to try to reinstate the ditches, we certainly get a lot of concerns being expressed by the residents. So it's certainly something that we need to take in steps in terms of how we address it with the residents to be able to demonstrate that there is a reason why we're trying to follow up in terms of trying to reinstate those ditches and the reason for that.
And do you know, some of these, it happened a long time ago, but are there city records of whether or not they had approvals for altering the drainage?
Unfortunately, when we brought the policy forward, that was one of the big challenges that we had, is the practice from the former municipality varied quite a bit. Some of them issued permits, some of them didn't. But the reality is a lot of these infills were actually done without even city knowledge. So trying to go back and retrace it often is very challenging. And that's why when we brought the policy forward, the intent was really to try to curb that practice so that the city could have some control over how ditches are being altered. And then in terms of the looking back, it's really more on a complaint and where we have problems.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. Any other questions? Councillor Clark.
I'm surprised that you're saying we only had policy on this stuff in 2008. I had policy pre-amalgamation in the 80s, and we had issues with respect to diverting water onto your neighbor on Mitch Owens Road, of all places, during the 90s. And generally our policy has been that you're not entitled to inundate your neighbor, whether it's by filling in a ditch or any other way. And I really find it strange to say, well, we got a policy in 2008. Well, my concerns are that it's not just whether they fill in the ditch, it's whether they build up the property on infill, which creates problems for the neighbors. And the only one I've had so far in this term is over on the towards Bathgate, and it was quite solved by the building department. So if you have a policy and they don't, and they have a policy, is it possible to marry those policies, something like marrying the roads between the Blackburn-Hamlin Extension and the Brian-Coburn?
Mr. Chair, if I can clarify, the point that you're making reference to is mainly the drainage between properties, and certainly the drainage bylaw has been in place for a number of years, and it's certainly applicable in most cases. The piece that we were referencing were basically front yard ditches, roadside ditches that were being altered, and what we've actually done with the policy is aligned it with the drainage bylaw. So everything now falls under the drainage bylaw. Some municipalities prior to 2008, some of them had approaches and permits to allow infilling to occur. Others didn't, and that's where we really had inconsistencies in terms of approach. So what we brought forward in 2008 was basically a consistent approach and one that aligned with the drainage bylaw.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Moffat.
I just want to clarify why it all came forward in the first place. I'm not talking about what I was talking about was closed drainage versus open drainage. I'm not talking about filling in a ditch to just fill it in. I'm talking about doing it properly engineered with a culvert, with a catch basin, with the swale, so that the runoff, the road drainage runoff still performs properly. That's what I was looking at, and I've already discussed this with staff, with the two gentlemen that you have here today. And the reason was because a couple people have done this contrary to the bylaw, but yet technically what they've done doesn't adversely affect anything. So just trying to work toward a solution that can address those situations without having residents have to go and tear out the work they did that really causes no negative impact whatsoever. That's the point of the inquiry. I've already brought it up with staff, and they've agreed to go back and look at it and see if there's a way to address the situation.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other comments, received? Received. Item number 5 was also held by Councillor Hubley, increased use of scooters and e-bikes. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll see what I'd like to do, if the committee would agree. I would like to defer this item till December, January, February, doesn't matter, because what I was looking for is a more robust answer from staff. I really want to know what we're doing with the province to identify shortages in the regulations around these, what we're going to do for local bylaws to deal with the issue of scooters on sidewalks and whether or not they need a helmet, and e-bikes on cycle tracks. I'd like to get into a lot more detail on this. So if committee would agree, I would prefer to just defer this item for now and do that later. Agreed?
On deferral?
Yeah, I just...
It should be referral to the cycling plan. That's where it's going to be dealt with. So you don't need deferral, you just need referral.
It can't be, because we're talking about scooters as well as e-bikes. Yeah. So it can't just go to the cycling. It's also, a Provincial Highways Act here, too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think I'd like to send it on, but with some information similar to what Councillor Hubley is saying that we do need. I'd like to know how people can use e-bikes through the city safely, and because with the aging population, they're going to get more and more and more on the scooters. So it's, I think, putting it off, but we do need to get some direction to staff that we do want to have more detail on it. Whether it's in the cycling plan or outside of it or in both, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'm looking to staff here. We have referral, deferral, or table. What would best allow you to, you understand what the committee members are looking for, which of those options would best allow you to achieve that?
Well, Chair, I'd like to mention that we have both a section in the cycling plan that deals with where e-bikes and e-scooters can be used. We've also taken the cue from some of the conversations with councillors to look deeper into issues like parking. We're extremely supportive of increasing the number of people using both e-bikes and e-scooters. In terms of the working with the provincial government, that is ongoing. It's part of our interaction with the minister in terms of the cycling strategy. And I think other cities as well have been struggling with the rules as regards e-bikes and e-scooters. And I think we will get some broader consensus across cities that we can then take to senior levels of government to help them clarify the elements of the rules that are currently unclear. As part of the recommendations in the cycling plan, we'll be working with legal bylaws and so on to make sure that we can back up our proposed policies if they're approved with the appropriate bylaws. So I think in summary, if I could, to bring this topic up for further discussion during the cycling plan would be appropriate.
Well, I'm hearing different from the Clerk's Department. Clerk's Department is recommending deferral because, again, it speaks to more than the cycling issue. So if someone's prepared to move deferral, Councillor Hubly, and carried on deferral. Not on deferral. Okay.
On December 5th, you're going to get the answer to my inquiry about the same topic. And it does examine more I know, but we have to wait for that. And then we may want to defer that when we have the information in front of us. And we may want to look at the cycling master plan, which I find out from a very good source this morning, has other things with respect to allowing these things who are in the province's acts are considered pedestrians as far as regulation is concerned. Those mobility things are considered pedestrian uses. So you can't keep them off the bike path, particularly if that's pedestrian walking paths. So I really think there's a lot of debate coming on this topic, and I'm going to you can defer this one, and that's fine, but you're going to get another one on December 5th, which will stimulate some more discussion, and you're going to get more of it when we talk about the cycling master plan. And I really think that we just need to get the composite together somehow.
Fair enough, and you're quite right. We may end up deferring once yours comes in for a more global approach. Fair enough. Councillor Chernyshchenko.
Yes, thank you. I guess I'd like to be able to give even clearer direction or to ensure that a number of questions are going to be addressed. I could either, off the top of my head, ask several of them now, or is there another way for us to, if there is a more appropriate way for me to write those down and pass them on to staff so that when it comes back, I can ensure that...
Councillor, since we deferred the item, perhaps you could send your questions to staff directly and they could incorporate that into the response.
Thank you. Yep.
Now we're on to inquiries, and Councillor Deans indicates she has one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As part of the Hunt Club pathway connection to the Southeast Transitway Station that includes the pedestrian cycling bridge over the Airport Parkway, a new pathway link has been constructed for pedestrians and cyclists to access the South Quay Station. This new link runs under the railway, then parallel to the transitway between the rail line and the transitway. It's an important cycling pedestrian connection for the residents of Glasgow Southgate Ward. Although the pathway is complete, access to this connection has been blocked off at both entry points as part of the construction of the pedestrian cycling bridge. Residents previously had access to the pathway system around the stormwater management ponds. This access has been suspended due to the Airport Parkway pedestrian bridge construction project. Residents are requesting access to this pathway connection on the east side of the Airport Parkway. Could staff review the feasibility of allowing access to the constructed pathway system on the east side of the Airport Parkway while construction of the new cycling pedestrian bridge is on hold?
Any other inquiries? Other business? Adjournment. Okay, next meeting is Friday, November 15th at 9:30 a.m. in Andy Hayden Hall.